We got to get going here. People are asking so many questions. I got to like jump right in. So a couple questions right off the bat. I mean, we have Ryan here, and we're gonna get to him right away with some good questions. I have to remember which exact question we have him answering. The question was, have I ever done ergonomic keyboards? I don't like them. So, do you like ergo keyboards? I don't like them because I find them to be annoying. That's all. What do you think of Twitch girls? I think Twitch girls are cool. Also, there's a hashtag Twitch girls, which I almost posted to Twitter just now, and that's where the Twitch girls comes from. I actually went to go put hashtag Twitch, hashtag live stream, and Twitch girls finished, and I almost posted to Twitter as Twitch girls, which would be inaccurate, probably a terms of service violation to claim myself as a Twitch girl. Ergonomic keyboards. Why don't I like them? I don't like ergonomic keyboards because they're a pain in the butt and they don't work really well with VI, and you don't really need them if you have a low profile keyboard. This is a secret that nobody wants to admit. Everybody wants their big fancy mechanical keyboard. I hate mechanical keyboards. I joke that I'll beat you over the head to a dead pulp with it if you bring that into the office with me because I don't want to hear your keyboards. I've got problems with that. Actually, true story. There's my earplugs that I put in so I can't hear my own keyboard. I just am a freak about that stuff, so I don't like it personally. I also don't think that you're buying anything by the ergonomic thing of it. If you have a low profile keyboard, you're tilting your wrists a little bit. Is not that big a problem. It is a big problem if you have a mechanical keyboard and you're doing this the whole time, right? And then having it like this might be a thing. Because so I believe I'm a huge fan of low profile keyboards, and the Macs are my favorite. Same as the most famous keyboard among authors and artists and novelists and journalists. People can give me crap about using a Mac keyboard on a Windows machine to connect to a Linux machine all they want. That's what works for me. Okay, so that's all I have to say about that. What else we got? Why is our chat not showing up again? That makes me sad. Anyway, so that's that question. We had some interesting ones. We were talking. What were we talking about? Ryan, say something. Hi.
Hey.
How are you?
Yeah. Doing all right.
We were. I can't remember what was. I have a question.
It was the VS Code one.
Oh,
I believe
yes.
you wrote it up as is VS Code open
Yes,
source?
I did. This is such a good one. This is such a good one, and it caught me off guard, and I was like, "Bah humbug, Ryan! I don't believe you," and now I do. So, so I'm gonna let you throw it out there. Do you want to give us the URL so we can go look at?
Sure, I'll drop it in the chat.
Yeah, that would be nice. So, yeah, I'm. If you don't mind, I'm just gonna let you talk about it, and then I'll chime in after that since you brought it. I mean, I'm happy to tell him if you want to instead. It's up to you.
I can give the quick TLDR real quick.
Okay.
So, VS Code is ostensibly open source. There's a GitHub repo you can go to. It's licensed under the MIT 3 clause license, right?
Uh-huh.
A fairly typical open source license.
Yeah.
But here's the rub, is there's a lot of code in there for interacting with Microsoft's telemetry and stuff, the like usage reporting and interaction with their plugin marketplace, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't function unless you have a specific config for like the particular URLs and that kind of thing. And
yeah.
What properties to use and stuff. So when you build it from the repo, you have to make your own config file, and that's not going to have that configuration stuff for the telemetry and all that. And it's not going to have the ability to interact with the Microsoft Visual Studio Code plugin marketplace.
Yeah, which is, I mean, let's be real. That's like one of the main draws of the whole thing, I think.
Yeah, the marketplace is one of the big selling points. Is it's easy to click through and add plugin for whatever language you're working in or whatever tool you need.
Yeah.
Easily. And it's easy to share these, like sets of plugins and such. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that...
But Microsoft, the Visual Studio Code you download from Microsoft is actually under a end-user license agreement. It's has their special config they use when they're building it. and you have to agree to their terms of service.
Yeah, and this link right here. So, Chad, if you can see the screen, I'll just describe it. So, about halfway down through this URL, which is ghuntley.com/fracture, GHUNTLEY.com/fracture, FRACTURE, if you're on the podcast or something. And so about halfway down through the middle is a link to the actual code.visualstudio.com/license. And this is when, I mean, I was seriously dismissive of, because I've heard this before. I've heard people like go after Microsoft for the, I think you reminded us of it, Ryan, the whole, what is it? Extend, embrace, extinguish or something.
Embrace, extend,
and extinguish. And, and I was alive in the 90s and I would have had Microsoft's head just like everybody else. Yeah. And so, I mean, it varies here too. We can have a little bit of a debate about it, but so the proprietariness of this license is what caught me off guard. This is a proprietary license. Now, it might be acceptable to you, but the thing that triggered me, and I'll just interject it really quick when I saw this, was that when you install any proprietary software that you accept the legal license and you click yes, that's a big deal. I mean, I don't care because it's running on my local Windows. I can use it and stuff like that. But if you do that and you're doing it inside of an enterprise that has agreements with it and stuff like that, and there's the license, thank you. Then, you're accepting things. First of all, you're entering into a contract. You're entering into a legal contract with Microsoft when you download VS Code. And I do, and I'm going to continue to use it when I use it. I don't use it that much. I use Vim. But it's important that people know that they're doing that. And if you use VS Codium, this is the part I couldn't really figure out, Ryan. Maybe you can help me. So VS Codium, people keep telling me use VS Codium. It's got the telemetry removed. And I'm like, telemetry's not the issue here. I mean, that's an issue.
I mean, it is an issue because you're not, as far as I can tell, so I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
So take this as a grain of salt. But as far as I can tell, you're not allowed to interact with the Microsoft telemetry if you're using the open, not their distribution of VS Code.
Oh, interesting.
And you're also not allowed, as far as I can tell, to interact with the marketplace for the plugins.
Yeah. So
by using VS Codium, you get the core application, but you can't use the plugin marketplace. You have to manually add plugins. Not all plugins are open source and available elsewhere. A lot of plugins actually utilize Microsoft APIs and services and the telemetry and stuff themselves, and you wouldn't be allowed to use those when you're using VS Codium.
Yeah, and okay, so he does talk about it in the blog here too. I see VS Codium is an OSS desktop distribution. So, but after you've heard all of Ryan's summation of why that's removed, and by the way, it's probably good that it's removed because as Vera says in the chat, let me just repeat. Vera01 says, if you work, and Vera's been, Vera wants to, do you want to tell us yourself, Vera? Vera's going to steamroll us. Here he comes. He likes to talk, so get ready. Billy, I'm just having fun.
No, you're right. I like to hear myself.
Me too. That's why I stream. So give us...
Ryan's 100% right. I mean, everything he said is correct, and I completely agree with him. I just have no issue with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, but Vera did say in the chat here, it's front of talking now, that we should not allow anybody, legally, you are not allowed to install anything unless you have approval from the company. Now, people violate that all the time. I mean, constantly.
Legally, that's not true. Legally, the company can grant you the permission to do that, but no company should. Any company that has any lawyers on staff will say, no, that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that companies will not say that you can do that legally.
Yeah.
As long as the company gives permission, then you're allowed to.
I have a question for both of you then. So, I mean, both of you have worked in enterprise, and I have too, and we've been bludgeoned enough by policies and read enough documentation about that kind of thing to understand it. So, I mean, so those who may not know, what are some of the dangers from? I mean, I'm talking about legally dangers. I'm talking about I'm just going to spit it out. I think that running VS Code with unchecked store stuff. I mean, they probably do a certain amount of. I mean, it's like an NPM but worse. I mean, it's like Apple Store. I mean, you know what I mean. So it's like is there something that vets the stuff that's placed in the I mean, what's to prevent a nefarious plugin author to create a back door by you installing your favorite theme or something?
So Microsoft off the top runs virus checks against everything put on the store.
Yeah, so they probably they vet everything, but I mean, but
they don't read the code.
They don't read the
right?
code,
but that's no different than installing something off of the Apple Store or off of the Microsoft Store directly. Right. So there, is there an issue with it? Could somebody stick something in? Yeah, sure. Same. Adobe can do the same thing in Photoshop. Yeah. Right. You're looking at the reality of a company's not going to risk their reputation by doing it. A plugin author might, but most of them are open source. The ones that aren't tend to deal with AI more than anything else, at least in my experience.
Right.
And those are the ones that I personally worry about anyway, because I don't want what I'm typing sent to a random company.
Yeah. And I think that it's fair to say that it's up to the company to make that decision. So if the company says, I mean, I know people are going to violate this all the time, but if the company says, yes, you can use VS Code, it's a good chance that they would say, and you can only use plugins. I mean, you should only use plugins from the store. That means that their legal team has assessed the risk of using Microsoft. The stuff that Billy just said about, the company's legal team, in conjunction with the technical team, has decided to trust Microsoft's vetting of the stuff, just like they would do with the Apple Store or anything. But it's their decision. It's not your decision.
So, here's another funny part. I actually worked with in the federal government with some of their people, some of their departments.
Yeah.
They allow VS Code. They enable telemetry, but they disable the store.
Yeah.
And they pre-install the plugins you're allowed to use.
So, I'm sorry, what was that last part?
They pre-install, with the installation package you get from them, they pre-install the plugins that you're allowed to use.
Pre-installed with plugins that you're allowed to use. Oh,
so
I see.
They actually disable the store.
I see. So they disabled the store and they said, hey, here's some stuff that we know people have wanted, and then people request it and they put it in their own release.
Right.
Interesting. I mean, I assume they could do that with Codium too.
They do that with anything, yeah. No, they actually build it. So they work with Microsoft and they have their own special package built. I don't know if Microsoft does it or if they do it themselves.
Yeah.
But I mean, once again, you're talking federal government, so you're talking however many millions of licenses that Microsoft, that they get from Microsoft anyways.
Yeah.
And they originally were using VS Code or Visual Studio directly, but wanted the lighter version because so many people requested it. So they offered VS Code as an option.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm not concerned about those things, but I am at the same time that I'm like most people. We just want a thing that works, right? Of course, none of these problems apply to Vim unless you're using Vim plugins, in which case technically you should get those approved too. Nobody does though. I'm not telling you. You just got to figure out what your company's used to and okay with.
So think about this. The biggest thing a company's worried about for most companies, government now withstanding, and Fortune 500s are usually going to be different than this too. But for most like startup companies, mid-level companies, everything else, they're worried about when they get bought out, are they going to be violating any license agreements with what they have that's public facing?
Yeah.
So using plugins for Python, stuff like that have to be, they can't be GPL based, stuff like that. That's what they're worried about. Mm-hmm. What you use the code with, they're less worried about because the licensing is not as big of a deal for the developer machine.
Yeah, it is. It can become your issue really quick if you're not aware of it. Yeah. So anyway, that was the end of the question. So the truth is VS Code is not open source.
Actually,
the source code is open source. What's that?
Yeah.
Interestingly, Microsoft has terminology around this. They specifically have names for the VS Code Git repository versus VS Code as a product that they license.
Yep.
Yeah. Did they put that in there?
Confusingly, they're both VS Code, and they just call one the repository.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why
this distinct.
Go ahead.
And are referenced in the licenses.
Yeah, the licenses, if I remember correctly, VS Code repository versus Visual Studio Code.
Mm-hmm.
Really? Okay. See, and that's why, and we'll end this question here, but that's why I was hit so hard with this, because up until, Ryan brought this up, I thought VS Code itself, the thing you downloaded, was as free to use and sell and distribute as was the source code itself, and that's not true. They are different licenses, and so when people would hit me with the "Why are you using VS Code? It's proprietary," I was like, "What are you talking about? It's open source, and like you can get the source code and download it and run it. And yeah, but it's not the same thing as the thing you download. And this thing you download has extra telemetry and stuff. Well, isn't it in the source code? Actually, it is in the source code, and it can be removed from the source code and stuff. And it has been, because the source code is open source, but it's very confusing for a beginner. So that's all. It's not.
And here's the reality too: if you're running Windows and you're worried about the telemetry from VS source code, or Visual Studio Code, whatever the heck they want to call it,
yeah,
it's not that big of a difference. I mean, you're already getting the telemetry from Windows itself. It's not a huge amount of difference in that. Now, I get for people running on Linux that don't want to have it. People that are like Solomon and want everything to be completely free and open.
Yeah,
that is a completely reasonable argument. I think it's just an argument that survives in today's world.
Yeah.
But I understand it, and I understand why they would say that.
Yeah.
But that being said, I would also sit there and tell them, have you looked at every single, if you're writing code, have you looked at every single plugin code that you have in every license? Because no one does that.
Yeah, well, they don't do it until, as you said, and this is where my paranoia comes from. I was on a software team for IBM, and it was quite a slap in the face, because I went from an operations team that developed software and could use open source freely and openly, then ended up making a tool that shamed their Tivoli product. This is a different story, and got their attention because the salespeople were selling our open source tool as a part of the services they were selling, and they were saying, well, what about this Tivoli tool that you're also selling us and we have a license for? You're saying they're overlapping, and there was this huge internal thing, and they ended up consuming our department, and I immediately became a software engineer, started making more money, and had all of these lawyers at my door, and not at my door, but they were now making sure that having been so prolific with open source, that's where I learned Postgres and everything, that we no longer could use any of that open source software unless we got direct written approval. And that if we, because we were now generating software that was getting sold, that could be contaminated by our use of open source, as was done in the case of Oracle versus Google with Java, which we won't get into. But the point being is that, and I think Billy made this point, is that when the company's bottom line, or the team you're working on, is making money from the software, and you're under much more legal scrutiny at that point. It's one of the reasons I don't actually really like software development, honestly, because software development has so many of these things. We have an educator in the group here who said that they better stick with education because of all the rules. And if you're going to become a software developer specifically, then you want to definitely do that. I don't know what that is. So I'm going to turn that off for a second. Sorry about that. If that was something legit, I don't want to show that. So
the name has spammer in it. I'm going with it's not legit.
Did it have spammer? I didn't see that spammer or not. I don't know.
Mick Spammerson.
Yeah, we're getting more popular, and so we're having to fight. I apologize to the YouTube community. We're having to fight off spammers and trolls a lot more frequently than usual, which is
what you were saying, Rob. I agree so much with what you're saying. It's such a pain. That's why there's been tools that have been developed. I can't remember. It's I think it's one of the partners for Artifactory or one of their competitors.
Yeah,
but it goes through and it doesn't just scan. It actually caches everything that you want. So it does a pass through instead of like using whatever npm's repository is. It would use your internal URL, and it actually proxies it through the npm repository.
Yeah.
It then checks the license file that's included with it, and then it goes against the database where legal's gone through and approves certain licenses. And if it's not one of the licenses, it displays an error message rather than downloading. And then it tells you have to contact the legal team if you want it. Usually, or whatever they put in for the message. But that way, they get around of having to manually check every individual repository and every individual plugin, and they make it so that you only have to check the majority, just based off of the license itself, and these licenses are okay and these licenses are not.
Right.
Which is still a pain because, you might be wanting to use one that is okay, but the 5 layers down, the dependency for it's not okay.
Yeah. And I guess that it's a summary there is that the legal pedigree of all of the projects that are involved in any software you write is going to come under intense scrutiny before it gets released and sold. So if that's not what you want to do, you might want to stay away from software development. If it's what you want to get into, be very careful. There is another kind of negative thing I have to say. Be very careful what source code you look at. This is into the advice category of, questions, conversations, advice. I don't want to go overboard on this. You don't need to be super paranoid, but if you are planning on making money by writing proprietary software for a company, and that's a very specific thing, but if you are doing that, then doing casual cavalier things like looking through the illegally obtained source code of Twitch, for example, puts you at risk because you've been tainted and you may be asked point blank in an interview, have you ever looked at illegal software and what? And have you ever used it in any way? It would be a very competitive, software development position that you would be going for that would ask you those kind of questions, but it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that you would be asked to answer for those things. And so if you are going to look through those things, you'd have to be prepared to lie to them, which I'm not telling you to do, but, just be careful. Because, that's exactly, companies pay a lot of money to put a software developer on the bench so that a certain amount of time legally can pass before they can participate in any code in the same vein because of a non-compete or because even without a non-compete, they were working for a competitor directly writing software that is directly competing in the proprietary world. And these days, you got open core business models where people are all writing open source and that proprietary stuff is less of an issue. But if that is your intent, if your intent is to work, and make the really sweet money, making proprietary software for a big company, that might be an issue you want to take into consideration. Beginners don't think about that. And they always ask me, have you seen, the Twitch source code? And I'm like, hell no. You will never, ever catch me opening that. I think it's interesting. Some of the things other people have told me that found out about it, but I'll never directly look at it because I don't want to ever have to answer that question. I'm not writing software for money, but if I were, I would still not want to put myself at risk in that area. Go ahead.
It's really funny. There's a YouTube channel, I think it's called like Dave's Garage or something like that, but it's an old Windows developer who was around like through Windows 3.1.1 and on.
Yeah.
And he goes through, he actually wrote the original Task Manager. He wrote the original Zip plugin for Explorer, all that type of stuff. So he's been around for quite a while. But he goes through and he talks about some of the stuff he's written and everything else. And he was even saying to this day, like when they had the release, I think it was of Windows 3.1 code, he refused to look at it and everything, but he wanted to talk about some of the stuff that was in there. So he contacted Microsoft's legal department, and they gave him approval to get actual source code directly from Microsoft so that he could talk about it on his YouTube channel.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And everything else. And so, as I say, I understand the mistrust of Microsoft a lot too. Anybody that knows me won't say I'm a Microsoft fanboy. I use Linux for everything I do in terms of servers, all that type of stuff, but I still run Windows on my home PC, my main PC. Yeah. And it's because it's easier. I love Linux to death. I love it for everything, but it's not a great desktop OS.
Yeah.
And Microsoft used to be the absolute epitome. It was
You're going to get lynched. I've said that lynched a couple times. But
I'm okay with that. Like,
I know, me too.
If you could prove that there's stuff you could do better inside of a straight Linux distribution and not in WSL2, I'm all for it.
Ouch.
But the reality of it is you can't anymore. Yes, performance is slightly different, but I don't build software on my own computer anyways. I build it on my servers. So it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But that all being said, I understand why I was a Linux. I used Red Hat. I started with Red Hat 3. That's not Red Hat Enterprise Linux 3. That's Red Hat 3 before it was Enterprise.
Oh, yeah,
so I had used them way back when.
Yeah.
I think my very first installation was SUSE. Yeah. We're talking, I've been using it forever. And, I still, to this day, I use Debian for all my Linux servers, everything, all my servers.
And, now, that being said, that's kind of where I go with it. I don't even have to say it anymore. It's like, Rob Pike uses a Mac to do all his development, and he's, created entire operating systems. He doesn't care what, some really zealous, new Linux user has decided to say about their skills or their decision making. They're like, oh, okay, that's nice. Go about your day.
It's really funny. Linus Trevold just did his very first build of the Linux kernel on a Mac.
Did he really?
He did the new ARM chip that they have based on.
Oh, did he? Yeah.
But he has Linux installed on it, and he says Linux has finally gotten well enough on there that he likes it because it's so small he can travel with it.
And
he
it's
did
low
it.
power and has good battery
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
Super
And so
duper
you
low.
know,
Been since like August last year, I think, that he's been rocking
mhm,
some form of MacBook.
Yeah.
right.
Okay, I'm going to
Yeah.
make a question for that because that's kind of interesting. Is Linux going to run on Mac M1 and 2
It already
chips?
is.
And
You
the
know,
answer
that's what
is
Linus is
easy.
building it on.
It is, and Torvalds is really interested in making it work, right?
Yeah, well, no, Torvald actually has it working.
He has it
Yeah,
working.
there's
Yeah.
already a distribution you can download right now for M1's or Apple
A straight up Linux distro for
Asahi
them.
Linux.
That's so cool because that was a sticking point for the latter edition PowerPCs because the Broadcom chips and stuff. I wonder if those are still
Yeah.
good.
So, it's also really funny. He had a huge thing out where he went off on a bunch of Linux distributions because I think it was his daughter or somebody was in college and they went to add a printer and it
I
required
remember.
administrative privileges. And they didn't have it, only he did. So he would have to travel there
Yeah.
to go and
Oh.
set up a printer for me. He's like, this is why no one runs desktop for Linux.
Yeah.
Because you have to be administrator and this is bullshit.
I remember reading something about that. That's like, to this day, that's like one of the things he's most known for is, I mean, if he doesn't like something, because I know he pretty much went, I mean, he's famous for going off on people, and he went
He actually dropped that a lot. It's funny. I know people from Finland and stuff like that. That the way that he would talk is just common. They don't beat around the bush there.
Yeah.
And he didn't understand as the world changed, it became more PC friendly, and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
It was.
I will say there's more nuance to the topic as far as like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the internet has changed insofar as like there isn't room for ambiguity when you're talking about software developing open source via mailing list.
Mm-hmm.
So it comes off as being very abrasive to communicate clearly.
Right.
And unfortunately, Torvalds has ended up in the position of being somewhat of a public figure in that people depict everything he does and come away with like brat.
Yeah, and I almost want to make a question for that.
opinions.
I almost want to make a question for why does everybody think Linus is so mean, and we probably should save that question for another day. That's a big. Speaking of
it's not.
being mean.
It's come a long way, but he actually took some classes and stepped away for I think it was like 3 or 6 months or something like that.
Yes, I'm very aware. I mean, if we do that one, we should probably show a little bit of the video. Ashi Linux does not support GPU acceleration yet. Okay, so that's underway. So the answer is yes, it does work, but the stuff on the edges is still going to have to, on the outside of Linux kernel and stuff, is going to have to be added. I assume that means a lot of the like the keyboard hardware and the USB drivers and stuff like that.
My understanding too
USB will be fine. Just the GPU is a special case because GPUs are always a special case.
Yeah, they are. They really are.
Like the CPU would have been less of a problem because it's still ARM, even if they have custom extensions.
Yeah, right. All right, we're going to change it up a little bit here. We got a question here that somebody asked. I think 2 weeks ago. No, it would have been last week, but it would have been like 5 or 6 days ago. How do you? We talked about this a little bit, Billy, too. How do you balance work life and mental health?
I don't. I do now. I didn't for many years. I probably spent 20 years in the field before I started doing it.
Yeah. And we've talked about that, right? Does anybody else have?
Yeah.
I mean, do you, Ron? You want to throw something out into the ring, or?
I'm struggling with work-life balance.
Everybody seems to have that same sort of answer. How about
I'm a bit of an odd case because I'll throw myself more into work than anything else, anyways, just by nature.
Yeah,
that's how I am too.
So.
Yep. Yeah. That's how I am too. It took me getting engaged to a woman who already had a kid to realize that I wasn't spending enough time with the kid. And the kid would come into my office and say, "Please play with me. I haven't seen you yet today."
Oh wow, yeah. Well, that'll do.
And it took me hearing that to realize that I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So nowadays, about 6 p.m. every day, no matter what, I'm done. Unless it's an absolute emergency, I tell them from 6 till about 9 p.m. when we finally get her in bed and everything else, and we've had a little bit of time to ourselves.
Yeah.
If after 9 o'clock they need me, or if it's an absolute like dire emergency, they can call me. But other than that, I'm not in front of my computer. I actually like step out of my office and will not go back in.
Yeah. Speaking of work-life balance, I'm going to throw something weird out there since the chat's kind of quiet on this topic for now. Um, this relates in a weird way, I promise. I watched American Sniper last night for the first time, and
Great movie.
Not
realistic, but great movie.
Not realistic. For those who've been in the war, I've heard that before. There's many things. I actually dated a gunner who used to, he's a 5'0" gunner, female, who was
gunnery sergeant.
She was a gunnery sergeant, and she was amazing in many ways. And she used to tell me similar stories. And I have all the respect in the world for the veterans. And actually, more than anything, I mean, I realized it was kind of over the top, but it really did give me a healthy, shot in the arm in terms of like increasing my love for the country and the particularly the military. I know that's not the holiday right now, but going out of their way to protect us. But the reason I brought this up is because I know this is weird, but there were scenes when he is, and I feel like it was acted really well. Some might disagree, but he was trying to work out the work-life balance with the worst possible situation ever, where he knew people were dying, and he knew that, according to him, according to the movie, true evil was happening all the time while he was playing with his kids at home, and his wife could not see the disconnection, and she's trying to help him, and but there's a scene where I won't spoil too much, but there's a scene where he about kills a dog because this boy is playing with the dog and he thinks the dog's going to kill him because he's got a little bit of PTSD, not a little, quite a bit actually, and then he has to deal with. He ends up doing 4 tours, and I definitely will not spoil the movie. Nobody in here, please don't spoil the movie. But when I was watching it, I was thinking how easy the struggle I've had work-life balance has been. And I went into this question the other day thinking, God, I've learned so much over history. My ex-wife will tell me that I never figured this out, and yeah, and I feel like I feel like a little bit of perspective is to be had there. It doesn't mean that we can't pay attention to it. No, we still need to pay attention to it. But you can figure it out. I think the biggest thing is to just be able to leave it. But advice like that comes from me, and maybe I'm talking to somebody who's in cybersecurity who's having to deal with all kinds of content. I mean, I had enough PTSD just having to track down the people that getting this black hole in the mail system, because I was the mail manager at an account I worked on. I was in charge of all the mail, and our mail kept getting blocked because we had people sending, frankly, dick pics and shit like that from the company. And in fact, we had to let one guy go over it. This is a different issue, but and we kept getting black hole. I'm like, why are we getting black hole? So I had to go through and moderate some of that stuff, and I did not want to read people's mail. I did not want to go through their mail. I did not want to be exposed to that. And some of the topics, I mean, it's not like the kind of same things that I'm sure other people have to deal with. But my point is that there are cybersecurity jobs. I've heard that, for example, Facebook moderators and Twitter people that they pay to do Twitter moderation and Facebook moderation. And I mean, say what you want about social media, but the people who have the job of like evaluating that content every day, all day, I mean, eventually saying, oh, you just need to make your work-life balance better. Sounds kind of trite, just like it would sound trite to the protagonist of American Sniper. If you were to tell him, oh, just get over it, man, have some beers, forget about it, and you can't. So I don't, when this topic comes up of like work-life balance, I think it's super important that everybody look at their own situation, and it's fine to listen to other people, but it's really about you finding your balance. For you, Billy talked about what it took for him to find balance, and I just, that's the only advice I have is you have to find your own way. You have to find your own way. I know a police officer that almost killed himself actually because of the stuff he had to see every day. And the guy became a racist asshole because of the stuff that he dealt with every day. And it wasn't because, all the criminals were black. It was because the criminals he dealt with in a particular area were black or minorities and stuff like that, which is super horrible. And I know this is going to get political really quickly, and I don't want it to. I don't want this to become, like a whole, thing. I mean, this is a very heated topic, and you're just talking about work-life balance, right? But there are jobs out there where work-life balance is like critical to survival. And then there's our job. You know, like there's my job. Like I need to wake up and roll over, and check my mail and, on my laptop and like dial into the call and for us, work-life balance, I think is something that we've been kind of gifted. I will not ever go into work for the rest of my life. I just will never do it. I would never, ever take a job to do that. Mostly for the work-life balance. For me, an hour of travel a day each way, 2 hours total lost per day, is so bad that I would never, ever do it. I would never do it. So one of the great freedoms of technology and knowledge work is not for all jobs, but for many, many jobs. It is very empowering and it's freeing and it allows you to have that work-life balance. And there's pretty much overwhelming evidence of that at this point. And there's definitely evidence of that in my own life. I mean, I was able, in fact, so much so that my church ended up leaning on me harder because they knew I was home. And they would say, we need to help this person who's getting evicted from their home move. Can you help us out? And I'm like, I'm at work. And they're like, yeah, but you're home. And it's an emergency. Nobody else is home. And I'm like, okay. And then I would end up working late that night. But I could do it. It's kind of annoying. Eventually had to kind of push back against the church and say, look, just because I'm the only guy home doesn't mean I had to push against my wife too. Because she one time, first week I was working remote, my wife and their neighbor, my ex-wife, and her neighbor brought all of the toddlers over. I'm not kidding. I had my 2 toddlers and I had an extra 2 or 3 toddlers. And I love to play with them and jump on the trampoline. I love all that stuff, right? And they just dominated my attention. There was nothing I could do. And they were already in the house and she had already made plans and invited them over. She didn't even talk to me. She didn't even ask me. And she goes, okay, we're going to go. You're going to be okay, right? And I'm like, I'm working. She goes, you're home. And I went, no, I'm at work. I'm upstairs in the closet trying to write code. I can't watch these kids. She goes, well, we'll be a bit. So she just left. She just left. And that was the last time. Because after that, I did not, there's many times I lost my temper, but on that one, I didn't. And that one I said, look, we got to have boundaries here. I cannot do that. I cannot code and do that. And eventually in our new house, I got two walls between me. My rule was 2 doors. 2 doors you had to go through to get to me so that I could go to work and then I could go back. And we could have a whole thing on working remote and to how to keep that balance. A lot of people suffered with that challenge during the COVID thing. And I appreciate that. But I was like, been there, done that, because, you have to have that. You have to set that groundwork.
The one thing I will say about that is you are correct. You and me can do that without a problem. It sounds like Ryan probably can as well. But somebody starting off the career can't, and they have to realize that they are the low person on the totem pole. They are going to be the ones that have to spend the time when no one else will, because we put in the hours. It's almost like, you talk about with hazing or whatever else that they had in colleges or whatever else, where the low person on the totem pole always has to be the one that does the grunt work. And the reality of it is that's how it is, because once we get to our point, we're not paid for what we can do. We're paid for what we know and who we can talk to.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times I've tried to explain that even to people that were above me, going, look, guys, you don't pay me to code. At the end of the day, you pay me to mentor everybody below me. You pay me to be there to answer the questions, to do everything else. I code, but that's a secondary, benefit you get from it. It's because, I can architect these larger things. I can do this type of stuff because I've been here for this many years. I've seen the issues. When there's a problem, I can probably guess what it is prior to without even looking at the problem based off of the explanation of what's going on.
Yeah.
But people that are younger, they've got to realize that in this industry, it's really hard to have that work-life balance until you're 30.
Yeah, it's true.
You need that 10 years.
Yeah, even back in the 90s, I was constantly working for people to trust me to work from home. And there's a couple of really great comments here I want to read as well. Let's see here. Wow, a lot of good ones. So Rittenhouse says, I used to go hard on the job where I'm at now, but I realize it doesn't even help us. It just hides our faults and not having enough network team employees. Wow. Yeah, and that's part of that. What happens if everybody leaves and they don't replace you? Do you have to work harder? No, technically, you should do what you can, right? Barney says of the clients in the federal police child safety team, I minimize viewing the content once I am into the device. Wow. Yeah, and I think cybersecurity has to deal with that a lot, right? And by the way, if I were to work in cybersecurity, shh, it's okay. It's okay, doggy. It's okay, Sam. I know she's warning us about somebody who just came here or something. It's okay.
She's getting walked.
She's protecting us from something. I don't know what she's protecting.
There's somebody outside walking another dog.
Was
so we
it?
can see through the window.
Yeah, that was probably it. Okay, so Alien Worker says, if work is in control of your assignments, then you have to realize they can assign infinite workload. You need to decide how much you can complete, and not think to have an actual complete everything assigned, depending on where your career goes. I love that comment. Rittenhouse says again, granted, I've worked 23.5 hours overtime since Friday at 4:30 on Labor Day weekend, but it was necessary. Yeah. And I love this comment from Grimkey. I gotta comment on this one. So I struggled in the first 5 years of work from home, trying to keep my work in 9 to 5 time slots. Things got a lot better when I realized that no one really knows or cares if I just take a nice afternoon to go for a hike and work at night. And I've actually done that on stream. I've done IRL, and I've talked to my manager about it. My manager's really cool with it. I've told him that my hours, I work at night. At night, it's quiet. Nobody's taking my attention. And by the way, why not take good use of the sunshine? If you have sunshine, this is the thing I don't understand. If you're a knowledge worker, you're going to work just as well, whether the sun is shining or not. And so
That's a lie.
What?
That is a lie. I cannot work when the sun is shining very well.
So, and I guess so for some people, it's the opposite of what is expected. Other than meetings, you got to be careful. Every time I talk about this, somebody says, "Oh, I don't need to come to work on time" or anything like that, and they'll end up, missing meetings. I've missed a meeting before that overslept because I did all my work until 5 a.m. Poison D, I don't think we did. Let me go back and see if I can find it. And let me finish up here. So I love that. I love that you can make good use of your daylight and then do good use of your quiet time. And usually for me, that's like 4 a.m. It's about setting those boundaries professionally and personally, says Price Goods. Barney says the only time I don't work from home is when it's something I am passionate about. Metal Storm says, if I work outside of normal work hours, I log it, round it up to the hour, get double pay, the client gets charged. Woo, interesting.
So, yeah, and that's also great if you work in an MSP.
Yeah.
When you don't work in an MSP and you're on salary, not on hourly, that doesn't work so well.
No, it doesn't.
And
Yeah.
I went through, I know Rob's gone through the .com bust, everything. I didn't start until 2003 or something like that, 2002.
Yeah.
And I've always been
both.
I've been salaried pretty much the entire time. Basically, even when I started, I ended up moving up to a manager position, I think within 3 months of me starting my very first real tech job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been on salary pretty much my entire life. Therefore, I don't get paid extra for working hours.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing where they'll try to tell you salary job means that you work as much as it takes to get the job done. But they never ever mean less than 40 hours. Usually they'll qualify. Yeah, they'll usually say it, which means, usually 60 or 70 hours or something. And the truth is the law says, 40 hours or whatever. And technically, if you can get the job done less than that, but nobody will ever do that. It's putting your job in precariously imbalance if you're, and by the way, working is not about the hours, it's about the results. So
yeah. And depending on your manager, if you have a good manager that doesn't care how many hours you work, other than your meetings, you're fine. If you have, Rob knows when we used to work together, I worked 80 to 90 hours a week minimum.
Yeah, you totally did.
He would wake up early, whatever time his time to get ready for work, and I'd been up all night working.
Yeah, well, we would.
And then I'd work the next day.
Yeah, I had kind of a mixed schedule, but yeah, and then we would, and some people enjoy their job more than others. Some people gain great satisfaction from which I think could be super dangerous because if we're talking about work-life balance, that's saying if you do something you love, get a job doing what you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. And the real thing is, you'll never stop working because you'll just. And I know that because I started my own company, and I about destroyed my health. I'm still trying to get my weight down and a bunch of other things. Running your own company has got to be one of the worst things for your health and for work-life balance that you'll ever do. It'll also be very satisfying, but it'll be so bad on your health. If you do it the way I did. So
I mean, I'm the same way. You know me, Rob. I
yeah,
work towards work, but I've gotten lucky. I've sold software that I've made and made enough, that I don't have to worry about working anymore. And now because of that, I'm able to be picky about my job. I'm able to decide what I want to do. Like
yeah.
I was working for the federal government because I saw what was coming up with Ukraine and everything else. So I joined cybersecurity for them through the company I was working with.
No, there you go.
And it was something that it dropped me into a place that, and because of that, I worked nights for months when everything hit off in Ukraine because I knew we were going to need it. So I scheduled myself that way.
Yeah, and you could make sure you were.
And I could do that.
Yeah.
And I could work when I wanted. No one questioned it. Everything else, as long as I was at the meetings, or if they decided they wanted to fly me somewhere to go meet up with certain people, which I had to do a few times on the East Coast, they would throw me on a plane.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. Sometimes you'll be working internationally, and so you're actually a good asset at 3 a.m. because you can help the people in India, which I actually did on this team. So, you just don't know. There's a question from Poisson D, who's been very patient. They actually asked the question yesterday. And I think it might be related to this. It's a pretty long question. So this will be the last question for today. Questions are getting popular. So I'm going to ask people submitting questions. So please make sure to put them in our Discord so that we have record of them in order so that we can try to hit them in order. At some point we might have to, we get so many, we might have to pick and choose. I can't promise I can answer every question, but I'll sure try while we still have the time to do that. Maelstrom's got a final comment on the balance thing here. I typically work extra time if I'm on a roll and I just want to get something done. Having, quote, fun if something is delayed because another team or client asks for some ad hoc short notice. Late night or weekend work, etc., then it's charged overtime. Yes. Slightly different, though, as we are digital service agency. And then, I mean, we could always get into the question about education, whether you should be able to bill for it or not. And I think that's one of the worst. You know what? I'm just going to throw that answer right now. Should I bill should I consider learning time education? And I don't know how well. Yeah, this is kind of related to the other question too. So I'll lead in. I'll answer this real quick, and then we'll lead into this other one, and we should probably wrap up. So I think you should consider learning time, a certain percentage of learning time education. And of course, all the big companies these days consider half of Friday or all of Friday for you to do learning on any topic at all. It doesn't even have to be directly tech related, although usually they would appreciate if it were. So that's the answer there. I personally think that an hour and a half or 2 hours a day out of an 8-hour day spent reading about the things that you're immediately required to implement, such as Tecton. I've been charged with becoming sort of an SME on that. That's part of the job. I'm being paid to learn about it quickly, as fast as possible, and so that I can answer questions on it and deploy it and everything. That means, executing things in my lab and stuff like that. To be able to do that can carry over. So that's my quick answer on that. Anybody have a quick answer on that so we can get to Poisson's question? In terms of like learning time. Ryan, do you have anything you want to say? I mean, we've been talking a lot, so I mean, I'm just curious.
Bad on that one, really.
Yeah, learning time for education is a tough one though. But the thing I do want people to understand is, I don't think you should feel guilty, and you certainly shouldn't expect your employer to pay for your education. At most, they're going to want you to do a certain amount of that, and whether you might get somebody that wants you to do it on the clock. Somebody wants you to not read any books that are not related to the immediate thing. You get some crazy micromanager. And if you get in that situation, by the way, leave and find, there are, so many other places and opportunities to work that will happily give you all of Friday off, and in addition, some amount of time in order for you to do the job. Now, if you if you lied on your resume and you don't know the stuff that's on your resume, that's a different thing. So be honest. But what were you going to say?
I say, as somebody who actually used to manage a lot of people, I actually put in a couple different places I worked at when I was running divisions or running departments, that I actually required every person that worked under me to get continuing education. Whether it was, they had to get X amount of certificates a year, whatever else. The company paid for it, and we also paid for their time. And we would tell them that, however, we would discuss time with them of how much they would need to do it. And a lot of the certifications that they would want at that time, it would be like, I want to get my CCNA. Okay, great. That's going to take so long. We're going to give you, you have to adjust your CCNA this year because that's going to be that complicated, or whatever it may be. But we would break it down with them, and I would be very honest with them. Look, if you're going for this and you don't make it, you're not going to stay with the company. It's not that anything else. I'm giving you 20% time to study for this for a year, and if you can't get your one certification within the year, then that means that you're not putting that time into actually
You're
studying.
not putting the time
or whatever else,
or whatever.
And I need you to do it.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily.
I refuse. I'm one of those employers that refuses to micromanage.
Yeah,
I will give you a job, and that's that.
Yeah, but I do think it's important to say that some people get paired. I don't want anybody who is in a situation, and there's another question here that I really want to get to, but we're not going to be able to get to it today besides this other one. But nobody should feel stupid for not being able to meet the requirements of a job that might be over their ability. It is a constant challenge to even stay up with the stuff that's changing, even when you are doing the learning and you're keeping up. And even if you can't, even if there's something about you that doesn't go with this job, and I've only had this conversation with 2 or 3 people when I was mentoring, and it was a tough one. It was really, really tough one. I remember one guy in particular, and I had to have the conversation. I've been with him for 2 years, trying really hard, and he was dead set on becoming a game developer. And there's just no way in this world that any competitive game company would ever hire him based on his ability to produce code. And it was nothing to do with him as a person. He wasn't a dumb person. It was just, that was not his thing. He had other strengths. And so, Bill, you mentioned the 2-year thing. If you go that long and something still doesn't trigger with you, it might be that that's not your thing. And if it's not your thing, it doesn't mean that it's the end of your dreams. It means that there's some angle on the dream that you need to find. In one case, I told you the case where the kid came forward and said, "Mr. Rob, I really hate to code, but I love tech." Guy was, brilliant. He could write Python. He wrote all kinds of stuff on his own when he wanted to. He ended up being more of a marketing person, a people person, and a developer evangelist, those kind of things. And we might make jokes about that because we're engineers, and we hide in our little cubicles and we don't necessarily talk to people, and we, code monkey kind of thing, right? But that we need those people. We need those other people, and they're not dumber at all. It's a totally different skill stack. In fact, I think the management skill stack is something that I bow down to as a skill, as I worship it, because I don't know that I could ever answer for somebody else's performance. So,
Ryan, did you write that article we were reading about?
No, I found it and was reading it, and
okay. I say that, but we're talking about evangelists, right? Whoever wrote that article is the perfect example of somebody who is probably somewhat of an engineer, but they're more of a people person. They wrote a great article that we all looked at, we all read as engineers, and went, this has really good points in it. And it may not be things that people have thought of, whatever else, but the reality of it is that you may be somebody who is great at doing, you understand the tech, you hate writing the code, but you like writing about the technology.
Yeah. And
you know what?
Yeah.
And no one's going to make fun of you for that because we all use those resources.
And I've been very open, Billy, with that as well, because I tell people all the time, I actually don't like writing code. I like what it gives me. I don't do leak code for breakfast. Billy's far more experienced than I am. But I am a good communicator, and I'm a good connector, and I love languages, and so you got to do the superhero game or the D&D thing and figure out where your stats are, and you might be an 18 here and you're a 16 here, but you got those points to play with in other areas. So I don't want anybody to walk away from this thinking that, if they haven't made enough time for education and they're feeling imposter syndrome or something like that they're a bad person, that they're stupid or anything like that. You just haven't found where your balance of skills is.
And here's the biggest thing too, is if you're having trouble and you're working in a company and you're having trouble, don't hide it.
Yeah.
Go to your manager, tell them. Because here's what's going to happen. If you're a good manager.
I've done that. I've said, I don't want them to know that I don't know or whatever, and every time I talk to anybody in my circle, it was like, and this always happens on new jobs, by the way. When you get on a new job, there's like so many, sometimes it's not even like the technology that you can learn on the internet. It's like getting the tribal knowledge. There's just a ton of stuff to pick up, and everybody goes through it. All right. So I promise one last question here. This is really hard being the broker here, but so this is a pretty long question, but I really want to get to it. Poisson D asks, my direct report is an EPM even though we do one-on-ones weekly, since he doesn't check my PRs or direct output. Not able to directly comment about this. Should I try to form a guru-grasshopper relationship with one of the senior engineers and force them to guide me? If so, how do I trick them?
Okay, number one, don't trick anyone.
Yeah.
We're completely open. You go to a senior developer and you say, look, I really notice you're good at this and I want to get better at it. 99.9% of all senior developers love to show off how good they are at something. They love to talk about what they're good at. They will sit there with you after hours and talk about that technology because they love it.
Yeah, there are some. There are most are like that. However,
there are some that aren't, and you find another one who is. If you're a big enough company or you're somebody outside.
There is one. I've talked about one specifically, Joey, who taught me about Unix when I was a kid, and when I quit, I mean in my 20s, and there were other members of his team that were handpicked. They were all brilliant people, Reed College dropouts like Steve Jobs kind of people. And there were a couple of people on the team though that hated me because I was a Mormon. I was a Perl programmer. I rolled rollerblades to work. I was a total noob who used a Mac to code Perl that ran as root on their systems. And I can tell you that they were the definition of bastard operator from hell. They didn't hate me, but my God, they did not want to be around me. And if I had gone to them and tried to ask them anything, I tried my hardest to fanboy them, and I have pretty good social skills, and I tried my hardest to break into that group, and they weren't having it, man. And one of the other guys was a big hacker guy, and he would go off to DEF CON, and you could tell he was a nice human being, but not to me. And he wasn't mean to me. He just didn't acknowledge my existence at all. And so
that does happen. But here's a big difference in that.
Yeah.
Look at the time differences.
Maybe
you're talking when there is a much tighter community versus today where a lot of people are a lot more open because there's so many out there.
That's true.
People like to show off.
I think this community is an example of that. I mean, we come in, we share, we got problems, we share, we go, and it's one of the miracles of our time. I mean, there's about a bunch of bad things going on right now, but let's take a moment to take stock of this absolute miracle of being able to share in community exchange like this for free, by the way. I mean, you sponsor me, you follow me, and I spend my own money and time on it. I mean, there's, but there, as economists say, there's zero opportunity cost to do this. So take advantage of it. There's somebody out there, Hetana Senieski, even the Pramagian, who, by the way, thank you, Prime, for coming by the stream. It was very, very good to see Prime he rated me today. And so no matter what, even people that you have differences with, you can get over them. And the internet it's a horrible place, but it's also a wonderful place, depending on how you use it. So just find those places where Billy says people are going to bend over backwards to help you. And they will. Yeah. They will. And I'm one of them.
And even if it's not at your work, even if it's online, whatever else, you're going to find people, you're going to find mentors. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have screwed up royally at companies, everything else, and thought that was the end of my job. And just to have a senior person walk over to me and go, dude, we've all been there. We've done it. This is what you did wrong. Let's not do it again because, I had to spend 6 hours cleaning up your shit last night. But I'm not mad at you because I know you're not going to do it again, right?
Yeah,
right. That type of thing.
That is totally true. And and whether it's, and the other thing too is if you're going to find people that jive with your personality, and I think that's an important thing too. And by the way, if you're a beginner, and you can do it anonymously, but I'm going to say it again, I strongly recommend that you try streaming. You might be a person who doesn't even want to see another human being, but you can use Twitch to reach out and if you risk it, if you risk yourself, even as a beginner, putting yourself out there, you will attract other beginners eventually. There'll be people that are going to make fun of you, for sure. There's going to be people that are going to try to troll you. There's going to be people that get on your YouTube and try to use words that are going to get you banned. There's going to be all of that. And it might not be worth it for you. But if you can work it up to doing that, it could be very good for you because you could make your own friends in your own community. And that's a good, note to end on, because that's what this has become for me. Billy's become a very close friend. And I met him on Twitch. I think 4 a.m. one day. And so, this is one of the great miracles of Twitch. There's lots of problems with Twitch, but let's focus on the good, and that's the good. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Any parting words for us, Ryan? No? Is he gone already?
We never did get to the thesis of that article.
Oh, we didn't? What part did we miss?
never did.
Let's not leave without covering it. No, really.
Blame me for that one. This is what I do.
What? No, it's fine.
I can't blame you for doing exactly what I do.
What was it? What was the main part of the article that we missed?
So we covered like the license and all of that, and the legal and the like.
I thought that was the main
whole
thing. I guess that's not the main
marketplace value
thing.
and everything. The actual thesis, is, as far as I read it,
Uh-huh.
is that you can't really there's not really a good reason to use the open source versions of VS Code. Because of the whole value adds of the marketplace and the plugins and all that.
Oh.
But Microsoft is also encouraging people to use it as a platform. There's a lot of companies using it as a platform for their products and stuff. And,
is that what that's? That's what that's weird.
And because Microsoft owns GitHub, there's the whole GitHub workspaces
Integration, yeah.
Yeah, where it has VS Code in it integrated.
Yep.
But it's the official Microsoft one because owned by Microsoft, to further encourage people to use it and stuff. So there's all this ecosystem tie-in stuff.
Yeah, GitHub, Data Coves, OpenBB Finance, Gitpod.
Yeah, there's all sorts of companies using it as a platform, but companies that aren't Microsoft are stuck with the open source version without all these tie-ins, without marketplace access and all that. So you don't get the value add-ins of all these tie-ins from Microsoft.
Yeah,
So and I could be wrong about this, but I do believe Microsoft is allowing partners to sign up with them to be able to turn off some of it, but still have the without the license directly, but have the marketplace inside of it. And even there was even talk about them allowing companies to open up their own marketplace.
Yes, but that fundamentally, it's still you're at the mercy of Microsoft to have access to the marketplace, which is where the big value is.
Correct.
And so here's where I'm trying to get to is that the big part of this is that Microsoft slowly, incrementally adds new value add-ins, such as the language server feature, which is an awesome thing. And there's an open source version, but they have switched over to a proprietary one internally for VS Code. That is the default. You can opt out back to the other ones, but they're slowly, bit by bit, toggling people over to their own in-house proprietary options for these things.
Correct.
And that's their old school, and that's their old EE thing.
Yeah, that's their old EEE.
We thought they were done with that, and that's why you scared the crap out of me, because I thought it was such as new. Microsoft doesn't do that, and you're telling me that there's evidence that's happening in VS Code. And actually, not just you. It's like this write-up.
It's not bad, in my opinion. It's some of the stuff they have that they're very proprietary on because it's a brand new landscape that's coming out, especially some of the language servers and stuff that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That there are other companies that are competing for that. So what they're trying to do is they're holding it proprietary, and my best guess is at some point in time they'll open source those. I could be wrong, but I don't. Microsoft is no longer the Microsoft of the 90s. I don't think
anybody will disagree with that. But
they're not as aggressive about doing that kind of thing anymore, for sure. But I don't like that they have the option to pull that with this.
It might just be muscle memory. It's like they're trying to not do it, but it's so deep
they
in them.
Can't help themselves. The corporate structures are there. But they're over time, there's bits and pieces of what are becoming essential tools that are proprietary and controlled by Microsoft that are extensively used by open source communities that are now beholden to Microsoft.
Yeah. And they may not even know.
Language server implementations and stuff for open source languages that are commonly used by open source projects.
Does anybody know if they have a proprietary ownership of the patent, I suppose, for the language server? Because there's definitely a software patent there if they want it.
I doubt they do, and the reason I doubt they do is Perl's had a language server available for 15 years.
For VS Code, though, VS Code has a specific.
No, the concept of a language server is not new.
Okay, so that's not patentable by itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, depending on how broad you want to interpret how a language server is defined, like you could argue that language servers are 40 years old.
Yeah.
I mean,
This,
if you
this
think about it,
diagram.
technically, every JIT language basically uses a language server in some way, shape, or form when it's compiling.
Yeah.
Not even JITs based languages. Like, there's a lot of like, look at Lisp and Smalltalk.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this diagram at the bottom that, quite honestly, I haven't seen until just now. And it shows all of the proprietary hooks that are all over and everything. And I guess the point
that you can't avoid even if you're
using
VS Codium.
So, and this is what you're saying is the main point, is that it's a proprietary license
they're getting their proprietary clause into everything.
Right. And if in order to truly get an open source thing, it's not just using VS Codium, it's all of
not using any of these by default Microsoft proprietary plugins and all these third-party plugins,
and that gets back to the question that I think Billy was talking about with the whole, the freeing your software from proprietary dependencies and stuff, and that has become virtually impossible. I don't think I realized. I mean, Excalidraw can actually take a unique identifier. I think I'm just seeing this now. I remember putting off Excalidraw because I didn't have to pay, and I just realized now you can do it as an embed, which is kind of nice. Okay. Anyway,
but that all being said, I do agree. It is worrying that Microsoft is doing it. Look at any company. Google does it with Android. You have everybody that does it in some way, shape, or form. If you want the added value things that we own, you can, but you have to do this other stuff that you may not want to do.
Right.
And the argument comes back down to is it against open source philosophy to do that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're Stallman, then it's 100% against open source philosophy. If you're what I like to call a realist, I think that's just the way it's going to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll have to watch this one.
The problem right now is a thing.
Yeah.
Now I am more inclined to be in line with the Stallman line of thinking, generally speaking, but I try to be more pragmatic.
Yeah.
But I feel that it's a cause for worry of where things are going and the long-term longevity of open source projects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a lot of open source projects that are very, very old, in part because they don't use anything that's not also a nice, stable, well-supported open source project.
Yeah.
I mean,
because technologies come and go, and
the thing about IDEs, I used to use back in the day. I used to use an IDE called Padre, which was written in Perl for Perl. That's all it could do.
Huh.
And it worked fine for Perl, but I couldn't write JavaScript in it. So it's like once you start branching out to those other things, now you're looking at something that's be cross between all these other platforms. And to keep open source, who's going to spend the time to do that? Because it's not somebody writing that language. Why is a Perl developer going to worry about JavaScript code inside of Perl?
I do have to wonder if Stallman's copyleft stuff would have stopped this from happening. Because any of these things that are associated that closely to each other, you could make an argument that the copyleft stuff would stop it from being...
like having things licensed GPL or AGPL.
Yeah, it's going to get interesting.
100% agree, Inspector Diameter. Yeah, Stallman does free software, not open source. That there is a terminology and philosophical distinction.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And there is. But look at Apple. What happened with Apple when they were using Bash? They got rid of Bash. Why?
Yeah.
Because it required it was GPL.
I mean, officially they never said that, but we all know that's true. So
that's why. I mean, but that's what I'm saying is that no matter even if you had all the copyleft stuff out there, you're gonna have the big enough companies that are just gonna rewrite it into something different with the same functionality, but call it something different that they can now have the proprietary ownership of.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, on that note of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, we shall go forward to attempt to do our jobs. But we're all going to use Vim. We're not going to use VS Code. So there.
Yeah, I mean, I use Emacs with lots of
or Emacs. Emacs, whatever.
Ryan, I'm sorry. You can't go. No, we can't have.
No, we are not ending. We are not ending with the internet war. I refuse. Everybody, it's been great on the YouTube. Wave goodbye. See you, YouTube. Bye.
Have a great one all.